Okay, here we are live again. Went out and took some pictures last night. And here they are. In the last video, I showed you how I edited this one. I found a float plane. Well, Dave showed me where there was a float plane floating down by the river on the Snai. And here's some of the images that we got. I think that they're all 25 or 30-second exposures of this plane. And you can see in this one I bumped it. In this one we finally started to try and get some different lighting on this plane. And what we were using was a couple of flashlights. We were lucky that the stars started to open up, or the sky started to open up, and we could see the stars after a while because it was getting super cloudy by this point. And you can see here that we tried one where we had shone some light through the reeds and stuff, and what that did was it gave us a really cool effect on the plane. But I thought that effect would be even cooler on the dock. So what we had is we did a couple tries, and then I started to notice there was some foliage kind of adding to the frame of the picture. So what I did was I backed my camera up, and what that did is two things. Is it gave me the shot I wanted, for one, and I think, which one do I like better? This one or this one? I think I like this one better. It gave me the shot I wanted, but it also, in moving my camera, I forgot to level it. So we're going to have to do something cool with that too. So let's jump right into 1141 here. Let's see what we can do. First thing I want to do is level this image out. So we can use the straighten tool and say this is a straight line, and boom. Now our horizon is straight. That's exactly what we wanted. So that's a good first step. I think I'm going to like my as shot better. I loved the purple sky. When I saw it in the viewfinder of the image, I knew that I had loved it from the very beginning. But I know that this plane is white too, so maybe let's try and figure out a way to make that white. You know what? I don't think that there is a way. I think I want to just keep it that color. It should try to brighten the image and kill the contrast again, because that seems to be what auto does. It's giving us a lot of this green, and I don't necessarily want to see all these reeds. I think I just want the silhouette of a lot of them more than anything. So let's go in and see what we can do. I usually add contrast at the very end of editing. So what I really want to do at the very beginning here is try to get details back in the image. So I want to start in Photoshop. I want to start with the maximum number of details and then knock them out as required later. It looks like this fin is actually already blown out. I don't think it matters what I do. I don't think I'll get the details back on that one, but it's kind of hard to control that in super long time exposures. We can turn the whites and stuff down just to try and get a more even look and feel. I really don't mind having a lot of very black parts of this image. And I almost want this to feel kind of swampy and boggy, so I might end up adding some green to it later too. Let's just see what we can do. If we start with the most details, it might not necessarily look good to begin, but it'll look the best at the end, and that's really what we're shooting for. Kind of like a filmic look if I turn down the clarity there. Dehaze really helps the sky. I took another image of this exact same setup, and you know what? We might end up doing some stacking on this image because I took a longer exposure to try and get more night sky. We'll see if we have any more stars with that. So we don't want to do any sharpening at all yet. We might want to reduce some noise from luminance and color. In the last image, about 40 worked really great, but I think in this one, 30 is going to be where we're at. And then let's just look at the color. That doesn't really do anything for me. I think just a little light noise reduction, because really what I want to do is bring out the stars that I can see very clearly. We could do some cool HSL adjustments. We could turn some of these things that are yellow more green. Right, so we could, you know, make this forest, we can make it look more like autumn. We can make it more like summer. We can make some of the greens more yellow too. Have a really autumny vibe. Just you crank both of these this way. And since the plane is white and blue, we don't really, and the sky is white and blue too, we can play with these sliders and be pretty confident that we're going to be all right. Ooh, if I crank both these this way, it becomes really, really nice. Hello again, Keith. I can't decide if I want it to look like that. So I think in order to help myself, I know that I want part of it to be purple. I want the sky to be purple. And in order to maximize my effectiveness here, I'm going to try and take colors that are complementary. And what you can do is, if you're doing like split toning, you can have purple and yellow. So you try to pick something that's opposite on the color wheel. So I think my actual color of purple is kind of between purple and blue here. So like a really light orange would be the goal. Or I can split it into something that's more orange and more green at the same time and do a tritone composition. So what that would mean is that I would turn all the things that are yellow to orange and all the things that are kind of green to more green. That is that horrible? If I turn the things that are blue even more purple, what does that do? I like that, but I want the plane to still be blue. So how am I going to change that? I think I have to add an HSL adjustment later that changes the sky to more purple. So this effect is a little much, so I think I'm just going to back it up a little bit on each side. I don't know, give me some feedback on this. What do you guys think about this? This is the original image. It's kind of boring, if I'm being honest. So what I would do is either you could just go straight to orange and have it be purple and orange. That would be the double tone version, or like, yeah, you turn the oranges to yellow. Or turn the oranges to yellow-ish. This would be like the purple orange version. Or we can do the tritone version, and that's like more complex and it's more difficult for your eye to handle, but I kind of like it. I don't know. Let me know what you think. Speak now or forever hold your peace on this one. There's some aspect of orange in the clouds too. That's interesting. I can also totally change the luminance by color band as well, but I don't think I want to do that. Well, while people are deciding what they like, I'm going to take the shadows and find a purple color on the shadows too. And just see if I can nudge a little purple into the shadows. Yeah, that's nice. I'm going to do that later. No, I'll do that now. Why not do it now, right? Why not do it now? Just a little bit, like 4. So now the color in the back is purple. But here's the real question. Oh no, I can add in the picture later. It's fine. Chromatic aberration is something that we dealt with somewhere else. I don't think we actually have that much of it here. And we don't want any grain or vignetting. So we're going to start with this. Now, how can I insert the original image in here? What was this one called? Let's save it into Photoshop. We're going to call it Float Floatplane tritone. Floatplane tritone, and we are going to go and see that it is 1141. So we're going to drag 1141. Can we drag it back into here? That just makes us do the exact same thing again. Can we do 1141 the JPEG? We can. So I want to paste it in there. And what we can do with this image is, now that we've got the original, we can reference the original and see exactly what we were trying to change it from. So yeah, that's what we're going to do. I'm going to rasterize this because there's no sense in having it be a smart layer. What do we need to do? So I was talking before about how I normally like to try and do any removals or anything before I go too crazy with my colors. And is there anything that I want to remove or add to this picture before I get started? I wouldn't mind having a really nice looking float plane, but that's something that I already have actually, so it's not that big a deal. Pull up my chat again. Oh. Okay. So I mentioned a little bit about turning this sky more purple. I don't know if I actually want to do that now that I look at it. But there is some really obnoxiously green stuff going on here, like it's oversaturated. I think what happened was when I pushed the greens to even more green, it increased to kind of like a jade color, and that's maybe too much. So let's go into a hue saturation slider, and what we're going to do is we're going to decrease the saturation until it looks like something that we like. And we're just looking at the grass here, and then we can invert that layer, select our mask, and then go into the areas that are obviously way too green and paint in a little bit of white to reveal the mask. And what that will do is desaturate that area. You can see as we go over it, all that's doing is it's just killing some of that like super harsh jade green in this grass that's just a little too much for me. Some people might like it, but for now it's a little too much, so I'm just going to decrease it. I accidentally changed the color. What did I feel like I had more window here a second ago, but whatever. I don't know what I got rid of. Could have been anything. I wonder if I can just go back to like a default view. Whatever, not hurting anything. I feel like I can see more of the image now actually, so that's not so bad. So before and after of the change. I think if you want to get really fancy and still have saturation in the pond behind these plants, what you can do is come into here and you say blend if gray, this layer, and you only want the parts of the image that are dark to not be blended. So I think if you do it like this, go like a little bit here and then add a little bit of feather. And what that should do is give you some of that saturation back into the pond, because you're just saying if it's dark, don't apply the thing, but if it's light, apply the thing. Cool. So that's just a little change, because what we really want is we want the focus of the image to be on the plane and the sky. We don't want anything else. So we're going to do the same thing that we did in the other picture, and we're going to we're going to merge these layers, then we're going to make a copy of the layer, and what we're going to do is increase the sharpness. So we're going to change this name to high pass. We're going to filter it in a high pass scenario. And I know that in general with my camera, and it's going to be different for your camera, but in general my camera is about 2 pixels. It looks on this picture we want maybe a little bit more, and the goal that we're trying to achieve here is just looking at the float plane. we want to find the details of the float plane only, but we don't want to go to a point where we can start to see color and details. We just want to see just those areas that are very high contrast already. And what this is going to do is accentuate those areas even more. So you can see I very faintly have the details of that plane. If I change this blend mode to linear light, what that does is it just increases the sharpness. It's like 0.25 of a prescription change. And I think if I duplicate that layer again, it'll give us even more. So that's like triple the sharpness. Perfect. So that's giving us a lot of detail on the plane. But I think what I want to do is on this second one, go to my mask, switch to black, and paint out some of the sharpness on this foliage in the foreground. Since I was using a very wide angle lens, it's giving me a lot of different things in focus, even things that are very close to the camera, and I don't really want that extra sharpness on these leaves. I do want them there as a way to have the eye focused towards the plane, especially in a way that cuts off the back of the plane, because what I want people to look at is the plane and then look at the plane, where the plane is going to go. And you know, while we're here and slightly tipsy, let's talk a little bit about leading lines. So in this image, there isn't a whole bunch, but here's what I can tell you. There's a leading line here on this foliage that points at the plane. There's a leading line here that points at the plane too, which is really nice. There's kind of a pattern in the trees that points this way. Or not the trees, the clouds that points this way. And the clouds end here right above where the subject is. So you'll notice that I'm not actually in the thirds for the plane. Like you would maybe want to do it like this if you wanted the plane to be on a third. I don't want it to be on a third, but I think I've got a lot of other things going for me that are working for me. So that's one of them. And then of course you've got this straight line here that's leading right towards this thing. You've got another buildup of leading lines on this part of the shoreline, and what the bushes here are doing are creating a frame within a frame that say, hey, let's focus our eyes on this area. So typically what you would do in a photo is you would say, here's my focal point, put it on a third or put it somewhere in the middle of the picture. This one isn't in the middle of the picture at all. It's actually it's a little bit in the middle, but it's skewed to the right, but not skewed far enough to the right to be in a third. But it's got enough leading lines that I really like it. And the only thing that I would like to change, if I could, is that I would flip the stars to be on this side of the image and the clouds to be on this side of the image, pointing down that way. But unfortunately, I do not yet have full control over nature, so I can't do that. I don't know. Was that a helpful explanation? Maybe not, but that's one of the reasons why I chose this particular spot and this particular framing. So now that I'm completely off topic. Oh, here's another thing I want to do. I want to get another copy of this hue saturation. I'm going to turn off the sharpness that I'm going to keep the sharpness on. I'm going to turn off that sharpness. I'm going to go over here in the shadows and I'm going to try and get a high pass filter that gives me detail in the stars. Because when I did my other high pass filter, I didn't get any detail in the stars at all. And what I really want is, yeah, like this grouping here mostly. So everywhere else it's like too much, but right there in the stars it's fine. So if we go in the stars, we add a mask and we get our brush out and we have it set to black. Make it pretty hard. We can make it, yeah, we can make it maybe pretty soft even. And just paint out that part of the image that we don't want. So we don't want any of this stuff at all. And what we're trying to do here is just increase the sharpness of the stars. So if we have anything else, it's going to make anything else way too sharp. So we're not going to do any of that. And if you're watching this later on YouTube, let me know if that explanation about leading lines and stuff is something that was worth going into, because sometimes you just have no idea why someone picked an image. It's just nice to hear it from somebody sometimes. I really just want this cluster of stars, but I noticed that there's a couple other ones, so we're going to try and get as many of them as we can. And look, I see some dead pixels. What a dead pixel is it's when there's an error in your sensor. We're just going to try and get some of that's a dead pixel. I'm not going to try and sharpen a dead pixel. That would be silly. I don't know how worthwhile it is to try and nail down exactly these stars here. I'm just going to get rid of these. Let's just get rid of those. Those are already kind of apparent anyway. Let's focus on getting some sharpness into this star field over here, and let's get our brush to be a little bit less severe so that the transition zones between the stars that are sharp and the stars that are not a little bit less dramatic. We can add drama other ways. Okay, so now that we've gotten kind of areas where we don't want sharpness, it's kind of silly. So we want to, of course, turn this to linear light. And what that will do is just add some, it also adds a bunch of noise. I wonder if we could do this a different way, since there's so few stars. Let's do this a different way. So I was going to add, some sharpness to these stars that way, but I think what I'm actually going to do is something slightly different. So we've added sharpness. Let's remind ourselves where we came from here. We've added some sharpness to the entire image, including areas that are not that. Let's just combine those things. Merge those layers. We'll call this background. We'll call this one original. And the next thing I want to do is do a little bit of dodging and burning, but I'm going to do dodging and burning to actually accentuate the stars. So like last time, I'm just going to take curves and I'm going to boost the curves up. Of course, it needs to be in front of the background. Boost the curves up, and that'll give me some nice brightness. You can invert that. Go to your brush, make your brush white to reveal, and this time I'm going to set my flow to 33. What we're going to do here is zoom in on the stars that we want to brighten and just give them a couple clicks. Give them a couple clicks each. Each click will give them 1/3 brightness more than they had. So you need to make your brush pretty much the exact same size as they are. I notice here I have a lot of trails in the stars, and what that's causing, or that's caused by, is having an exposure time that's too long. So I might have had it at 30 seconds or something, which I think might be too long for this particular lens. Maybe I needed to go down to 25 seconds instead of 30 seconds. But that's fine. You learn. So we're sort of creating stars in a way here, where we're creating something that's perfectly round, but well, it looks kind of artificial. But I'll tell you what we can do. If it looks too bad, and it looks a little bad, we can reduce the opacity to reduce the effect. So there's nothing, there's everything, and I think what we want is something in the middle. We want some Goldilocks shit. So there, we added a little bit to the sky. That's great. That's all we really wanted. So we're going to call this Star Dodge. So we can also create curves adjustment layer with brightness. Just a little bit of brightness. Oh, we can do a lot of brightness. Let's do a lot of brightness. I'll call this just dodge in general. And what we can do is invert this mask. Go to our brush. Take our flow down to like 5%. I like 5 to 10%. And just start working on the areas where we want to accentuate the brights. And usually what you'll do is you'll try to accent the parts of your subject that are already bright, where you want it to show up even more. For some reason, every time I see this CGFOE, I think G.I. Joe. I wonder if we could make it G.I. Joe. G.I. There's a dash. J. OE. Because there is already an OE here. Okay, well, I'm going to finish this edit, and if I feel ambitious, what I'll do is I'll change that to say G.I. Joe. Leave a comment in the stream if you want this plane to say G.I. Joe. I guess that's another way to do it. I'll see if anyone wants it, I'll do it. So let's just see. Yeah, we're just adding a little bit more brightness to the plane. Ooh, there's a really, I just noticed that. So when we went in to add some dodge, what it did was it added some reflection from the lake on the bottom of the plane, and I didn't realize, but it's really beautiful. So we're gonna keep doing that. A little bit of brightness to the plane. It might end up being a little too much, but if it's a little too much, that's fine. You can always decrease the opacity to reduce the effect. Another thing that I like to do with dodge is to go into places that are already shiny and make them even more shiny. This is really good for catch lights. Hi, Rohit. What I'm doing here is I'm just dodging out the colors and making them a little bit shinier in the areas that are already reflecting light on this piece of equipment. I can see some areas where I've gone too far, so let's go back and reduce the mask there. See this area here that's already bright? We're just going to go over that again with this brush, and I wonder if I change this to soft light, does that make it even more glowy? Let's just do linear light. And I think also what we can do is we can add a Gaussian blur to it after the fact, and that makes it even more kind of glowy, but I don't think we're going to do that for this thing. It would be useful to do something like that for like a jewelry edit. If you're editing jewelry in like a wedding, that's what you'd want to do for sure. You'd want to do something like that, where you add a bunch of glowy dodge, color dodge to it. And that makes it look really beautiful. Now when I was in there, I noticed that there was some purple fringing. So do we want to add some burn first? Let's add some burn first. And what I think I'm happy with the brightness of the background, but I think I would like to add some additional drama to the background. So let's go into curves. And what we're going to do in curves is add some darkness to the image. And call that burn, because it's technically going to be color burn layer. Invert the layer mask. Switch your brush to white. And we're going to increase the flow to 10% this time. So every stroke is going to be 1/10 of a full stroke. And we're going to go into the areas that are dark here, and we're going to add a little bit of shadow in the areas that are already dark in this image. And what that's going to create is a little bit of a spookiness or drama to the image. And I just like that kind of thing, especially in night photography where I was talking about my experience before where I was taking a picture behind this truck, And I heard like the ground rustling or the trees rustling behind me. It's like, ooh, is it a bear? What's that? Like that, you want that kind of feeling to be conveyed in your art. So we're just adding some drama to the foliage behind this airplane in a way that makes it a little bit more spooky. And also by doing this, I'm covering up some of this color noise too, which is really nice. I think I can also, so here's before, here's after. So you can see how it's just a little bit, it's a little bit much. So I'm going to reduce the opacity down to about 50%. And now that's looking more reasonable. Okay, let's go back to dodge for a second and just see what adding some dodge at about 3% to these clouds does to me, or does to these clouds. Yeah, that just separates them a little bit from the sky. I think that's just fine. Maybe I don't want it there. I want like a big one there, medium one there, and just a little bit there. There. Yeah, that just adds a little bit more detail to the sky. That's what we want. We want every part of the picture to be interesting, but we only want the subject to be really noticed. So that's cool. Now that I'm flipping back and forth, this effect looks like it might be a little too strong too, so let's decrease the opacity to 67. Yeah. So there was the original. Here's the edited version so far. I think that's pretty cool. I need to, let's merge these. Have some birthday beer and go right into camera raw filter because I saw some fringing. So purple fringing, defringe, and it looks like we can get away with something like 2, and 2 really gets rid of all the fringes here. Now was there anywhere where I saw green fringing? I don't really see any green fringing at all. So just a little bit of purple fringing, not so bad. Let's do that as a step just to do the purple fringe. Now, typically, when I get to a point where I'm pretty happy with the body of the image and I want to start getting crazy, I'll save an additional copy. And then, oh, I pinned a comment. Okay, unpin. Okay, so now that I have made a bunch of changes and saved as, what I want to do is go into camera raw filter and really start messing around with the overall look of the whole thing. So what this is telling me is that the program thinks that I've got just too much magenta in general. I wonder if I can shift it just a little bit this way. So what I'm looking at here is 2 things when I'm moving these purples. Is I do want the sky to be purple still, but I want the white on this plane to be white. And I think what I see here is if I shift this just a little bit, it gives me the color that I want. Sort of in both places actually, because the purple was a bit much in the sky. So like a -18-ish. Now, what does it say? It's like make it super bright. I agree that it does need to be a little brighter. Not that much brighter. So let's increase this by 0.25. Let's boost up the shadows just a touch. Just a scooch. Because on phone screens, which is where pretty much everybody sees my stuff, the phone screens are usually a little bit darker than my screen. We don't want the highlights to be down anymore. Here's where we can add a little bit of contrast if we want to, or we can take a little bit away. Like if we're trying to get more of like a film look, you could say, you know, low contrast, more dehazing potentially. But I think that I want I want some contrast. And we added contrast in like kind of a custom way with dodging and burning, but you can add more in general. I think what I actually want to do as part of lightening the image up a little bit is I want to just do a little bit of a negative contrast, like -5, just a touch. But then you can add blacks in after. Yeah, let's do that. Vibrance. Vibrance is a real tricky slider for me because frequently I'll play with it. I'll be like, whoa, that looks badass. Look how cool that looks. But then I come back the next day and I'm like, what the fuck was I thinking? So I don't think I'm going to mess with the vibrance slider too much. Little nudges are all you need. The saturation is an interesting one here. So you could make this potentially look a lot older if you take the saturation one way or another. But we're going to leave it the way it is. We did the sharpness manually. This would be a nice place to add some vignette. You could do that, but I think I'm going to do that right at the end. So just a couple little boosts here and there. Now, I think instead of adding a vignette in your normal way, I'm going to add, instead, I'm going to add it kind of in a custom way. So we want a solid color adjustment. We want the color to be black. We want the opacity of this color to be low. And what we're going to do with it is we're going to go into the layer mask and switch it to black. Get a pretty big, pretty soft brush. And what we're going to do is we're going to paint in our own vignette. We're going to paint in our own vignette by removing the layer mask. Oh, the flow is set to 3. Set the flow to 100. There. Now we can really start to see it. So what you could do is you could, if you wanted to, you could create like a ray from heaven here. You could create just the plane, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to spread the low around so that the stars, and then probably even the clouds, and this whole area is nice and bright. Then I'm going to change the flow down. Actually, no, I'm not going to change the flow. What I'm going to do is I'm going to switch back to black or white on the brush. Add a little bit right around the edges of the drawing, just to get your eyes off the edges. Yep. And then, how do I deselect that thing? I don't want to deselect everything. And then what I can do is come in here with my opacity, and I can change my opacity to be whatever I want. So that's nothing. And let's just feel it. Just let your eyes blur for a second. Just feel it out. And I think it needs to be about 22. So that's how you do sort of a custom vignette. I think that the trees are a little bit too bright. Now that I look at it, I think that the trees are a little bit too bright. So we're going to do the same thing. We're going to do curves, make it low, reverse the layer mask, lower the flow. Set to reveal. Go to where the trees are. And just give her one of those. Just give her one of those. Especially these trees back here. And what's going to be tricky is getting in between behind. There is green fringing. Ah! I mean, I guess I didn't notice it from zooming out, so really I shouldn't care, but how does that look? That looks a little better. And I notice right on here, there's too much. You don't want to go too crazy with this because it's really easy with this process to make things look too artificial. And this already looks edited, so there. Okay, that's better. I find that to be better. There's some fringing left, so I'm going to merge these layers. I'm going to zoom in on this fringe. You can see this green fringing here. Go to Camera Raw Filter. Go over to the fringing tool. Find the green amount. Hop on into where the green fringe is, which is right on the edge of the airplane. I didn't notice it because the grass and stuff is green there, but I think it's pretty dark green. Oh, I need to actually move it. Like that. Yeah, so you can see it's affecting it a little bit. It's like 3. Now, when you do fringing, you got to be careful because there's a lot of green in this image, so got to make sure that isn't causing too much hassle for everything else. So green is defringed a little bit. Didn't make a huge difference, but it made a little difference. What I'm going to do is I'm going to open up Lino Trucks and use that to steal my my thing. Oh, so I a long time ago managed to press a random button that hid. Oh, I can do this. Perfect. Hid part of my UI, and that was really coming to bite me in the ass, but it got fixed. I usually like to have it down here. Do I want it down here this time? I usually want my signature wherever people aren't going to look. Yeah, I usually want it behind the subject. So when a person or an object has a sightline, like this object actually has a sightline. You might not realize this, but it does. I'll show you what that means. When you've got a person in a picture, typically, this can be really bad, but you have a person in a picture. They've got like a face, and their eyeball is here, and they've got a nose, and they've got a mouth, and they've got a really bad neck problem. You know, their hair is here. You know, the person, the place that they're looking, usually you want a lot of space in the image, and then you want the rest of the image to be smaller. Unless you want the person to feel claustrophobic, then you move them to the edge of the drawing or the picture and have them stare off into nothing. You can't see it. So there's a similar concept here where this plane has a sight line this way, and that's why I positioned it more to the right than the left so that it doesn't feel claustrophobic. I forget why I'm talking about this, but oh, right, because my signature. So I don't want my signature to be in a place where the sight line is heading. I want my signature to be in a place where the sight line is not. So if there was a person here and their eyeballs were facing this way, I would want my signature to be on the opposite side of that so that they can't see it. I don't know why I like that, but that's how I like it. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to increase that slightly to 30. And another thing I like to do with my signature is make the color match something in the picture. Purple's not doing it for me. Lighter purple? This white, maybe? This blue? Yeah, that blue. Just because then it matches part of my color palette. Actually, let's just try one of these oranges just to see. Orange. I like that. Let's do that. So we're going to make it a little more orange. Yeah, I like that. Okay, so before, after, is it better? Is it worse? Do you like it? We're going to do our typical thing where we export the full-size PNG. Floatplane tritone to PNG. That takes a little bit because it's a lossless. And then we're going to export a version that's a JPEG that's 2048. That's for Facebook. So that's what you'll see later if you look. There's probably a better way to export batches, but I don't know how to do it. And I'm going to export the original too, because then I can post the progress. Okay, that's it. If you liked this, it's not really a tutorial, but if you like hanging out with me doing editing, go to my page, give it a like. If you like it extra lots, give it a share. And if you want to catch this later, you can come to this Facebook page, or you can go to my YouTube page. And I think that I have that information linked to my About, but I'm sure I'll post it. So just like the Facebook page and you'll get it. Bye.